Frank J. Parisi.
Yes.
Let's roll 'em. Hello and welcome to Anatomy of an Entrepreneur, where every day is, fill in the blank, Georgine.
A great day.
Every day is a great day. Okay, that was pretty bland. But
I know it was. I wasn't prepared.
you know
for
what
that.
it is? I blindsided you.
Is that like a thing we normally do?
No.
Okay.
But we can if you want.
Yeah, let's make it a thing.
Like, I just go, like, it'll be like Mad Libs. Do you ever do Mad Libs?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can make it like Mad Libs. I'll I'll make a statement and you fill in the blank.
Okay.
Okay?
I like it.
Okay,
Give me
so-
one now.
You want to do one now?
Yeah, try it.
Okay. Welcome to Anatomy of an Entrepreneur. We have here tonight a great blank.
A great case study.
A great, still kind of bland.
I was
gonna-
going
What
to
do you
say
want from me?
ensemble.
Okay, a great ensemble.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great ensemble.
That was pretty good, Dennis.
Yeah.
He kind of beat you on that
He
one.
should be over here.
I'll trade with you.
Yeah, then you want to come over here?
Why not?
Can you talk about mxHero?
Definitely not.
No, okay. Anyway, thank you everybody for joining tonight. This is going to be a spectacular show. Let's get a little housekeeping done. We are brought to you by My Instant Office. If you need a desk, a chair, a conference room by the day, the week, of the month, come on in, sit down, and get to work. What we say is just add yourself. Just add yourself. Frank J. Parisi, I'm so sorry I'm looking at my camera again.
It's okay. We got a custom tally light.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm cheap. It's also brought to you by the Huntington Chamber of Commerce. Georgine,
Shoot.
do you know something about the Huntington Chamber of Commerce?
Tell me.
You're going to know this because it's said every single week.
But Alan messes it up every single week.
Do you remember what it is, though, or not yet?
It's the largest chamber of commerce
Where?
in Long Island.
On Long Island.
On Long Island.
What are you, from a foreign country?
Yeah,
Oh,
actually.
you actually are, aren't you?
I actually am.
You're from Bellagio.
My whole family
Italy.
still lives there.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm
So,
going
yeah,
back.
that's true. It's the largest chamber of commerce in the world. So now we're done with that, and we need to move on. By the way, tomorrow night we were supposed to be doing a seminar as a follow-up to the presentation that I made on live streaming, but unfortunately Len Marks had a flood in his basement, so he cannot be here tomorrow to work on that that live stream seminar with me. So that will occur down the road. I'm sure it won't be too far in the future. But we do have this awesome show today. The first person I want to introduce is a friend of mine who is also a past client, a gentleman who reached the highest levels of I don't know what.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out myself.
Yeah, fill in the blank. At Canon USA, and he retired from Canon, and he is now on his own as consultant. I have here Dennis Amorosano. Dennis, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cliff. Nice to be here.
Not only are you on the show this week to work with me and our guest, because you know the guest very well, probably
Sure.
better than me, but also you're a guest next week.
I am.
How did that happen?
Hey, go figure.
Marilena says, say hi to Dennis.
Hello, Marilena.
She's driving to New Hyde Park right now. So, but yeah, this is a true story. You're on next week. So it's going to be action-packed. We have on a really cool guest today. And it's actually somebody who you worked with for many years.
Yeah.
Before we introduce him, how do you know him?
Yeah, actually, I met Alex, who we'll introduce in a minute, probably about 4 to 5 years ago. And it was at a time where within Canon Information and Imaging Solutions, we were actually looking at technology to add into our existing portfolio. And so we were looking for companies basically who would basically be a good fit for us in terms of the types of services we wanted to bring to market. And just so happened we were working with a consultant out in Silicon Valley, and he kind of turned us on to this small Silicon Valley startup who was really tackling some of the biggest challenges around email. And one thing led to another, and we ultimately struck up an agreement and built a reselling program around that technology and brought that to market through Canon's direct channels of distribution as well as its dealers.
And it became very successful at Canon.
Yeah, I think if you look at, and of course we'll talk about this throughout the show tonight, but I think if you look at what they're doing, it's really unique and unique in a way that simple for people to use, but really effective in terms of addressing some of the biggest challenges that we all face in using email on a day in and day out basis.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So without further ado, I want to welcome Alex to the show. And I'm not saying his last name on purpose because I want to see if I can pronounce it correctly. Alex, welcome to the show.
Hello, Cliff. Hello, Dennis. How are you?
Good, Alex. How you doing?
Nice to see you.
Excellent.
So I'm
Good
going to
see you guys,
guess.
too.
Is it Alex Panagides?
Very good.
Bingo.
That's
Fill in the blank.
we all say it the American way. It's obviously a Greek last name, but that is the American pronunciation. Yes.
Pretty cool. Alex, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Can I do one question here? The streamcastnetwork.com live, is that the live feed that people should be accessing?
So it's in a couple of places, but the easiest for you would be on Facebook, and it would be the Streamcast Network Facebook page.
Okay. All right. Just some people are texting me. Okay. I will pass that along. Sure. To your question, I was born in Brazil to an American mother from Middle America, from Kansas, and my father was from Cyprus. So I ended up having, to this day, 3 citizenships. One for being born in Brazil, the next one for, I just say I'm an international mutt, right? So, and then I have the European citizenship or European Union through Cyprus. And then, of course, I grew up, I'm American, really. That's where I got all my schooling. And I did live 20 years in Brazil, but that was at a later stage. But I grew up on the East Coast, actually, on the West Coast right now, but grew up in Bethesda, Maryland, not too far away from you.
Oh, wow. What were you like as a kid?
Well, I was a little bit on the geeky side, I would say. But we moved around quite a bit. My father, worked for a multilateral bank, and had that experience moving around just a little bit. But as a kid, I was, I would say I was midstream between, like the popular people and more towards the geeky group. Did outdoor stuff, and I would say I was part of Scouts, growing up in the 70s and the 80s, just I guess a regular kid.
I know you're geeky because you gave us a list of fun facts, and everything on your list of fun facts was that of a complete geeky
Yeah.
nerd.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, got my first
But
computer.
I had some social, it wasn't completely like locked away. I had a pretty good group of friends. I was in a pretty high achieving, school district. So I guess it helped. A lot of my friends, because I grew up in the DC area, were international as well. When, it's our generation really that kind of grew up with the information revolution, right? We were really the first one. As we were growing up, we were accompanying the rise of the personal computer when computers became accessible. So I remember seeing, that first computer when I was in 5th grade, sitting there and just completely, smitten by the whole technology of the whole thing. I think it's computers were definitely part of it, but of course, Also ended up not really going into computers originally, right? Ended up getting a lot more into literature, eventually, and then of course there is mixed with some mathematics. I guess one of your questions is, I was one of those kids that I was interested in everything, right? There was really no particular, like people would ask me, what's your favorite subject? And really all of the subjects were good. And I think a lot of it is credit to the educational system that I was in. I had great teachers, in every topic. I just had a very wide range of interests. So yeah, but there was definitely the geeky element. Even I think I added there, we got into Dungeons and Dragons, right? Which is kind of like the uber geek type activity.
And you still play?
Actually disappeared, and I'm still doing, right? And
Wow.
now that it's resurged, right, in the last 5 years or so. So yeah.
Well, geeky is in now.
What's that?
I said
Oh
geek.
yeah, geeky.
Geeky is totally in.
So Alex, you're Brazilian. No soccer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't. You can't compete with like the native Brazilians in soccer. It's just impossible. But you go down there and try to play basketball with them, you're going to do well. But get onto a soccer field, forget it. They're incredible. Yeah.
Now you get to college, and you really have very little to do with anything to do with like computers, programming, or the geeky stuff. I mean, it looks like you did like a 180 here. What happened?
Well, I didn't consider it very much a 180. I didn't go into computer sciences. Computers was a hobby. It was something that my parents supported. They got me. My first computer had 1K RAM. Right, it was a Sinclair ZX80, and then kind of went through computers, upgrading my computers as kind of technology was advancing. And really, it's interesting, and I kind of use this today. Got into programming of the computers because there were no games, right? It was just hardware, right? The gaming industry wasn't there. The computers wouldn't support it. So if you wanted a game, you kind of had to write it yourself. So I've actually led that to my kids today. I'm like, if you want a game on your computer or something, you're gonna have to program it, right? At least something, right? And then I'll get you a better game. But in college, it was more the pursuit of writing. I really like writing, and I really didn't see much of a difference in writing computer programs or writing, a composition or a story. They both use languages. They both require syntax. They both have to be very structured. Good writing is structured. So it was really just an expression, just one more outlet for a creative expression, really, whether it was programming or whether it was, writing creative stories, right? I have a creative writing minor. And then I really was into the literature. I really liked that part. When I was graduating, I thought I'd probably have to get a job. So I went after economics, which I thought would be a harder science that I could use, and got my BA in economics as well. And then use that really as the hook, to get employed. But really most useful, I would say, in my career was the ability to write, right? So that's served me a lot better, although having the analytical has helped as well.
I think we have a question from Georgina.
Yes, we have an anonymous ask. Where did you first learn to program?
Back then, there was no, online class to learn, or even classes were hard to come by. It was, I was in a store and I saw this book on programming. It was college level. Actually, I was, I think, 13 or something. And I just picked it up and just kind of went at it. Yeah, it was. It was in a way. It was the lure of trying to develop. And actually, part of the story is interesting. Is that to actually have a game, a graphical game, in those days, you had to write in assembly language, right? You had to go right down to the bits. So I ended up getting a copy of 865, or it was like 880 assembly language programming, and wrote my first assembly language program when I was 14, driven by the need to have a game.
Alex, what was the game?
Yeah, so it was a super simple game. I called it radioactive. There was like a little rock in the middle, and it would shoot off little radiation balls, and you had to try to touch the rock without being hit by the little radiation coming off. Which nowadays I actually sat down. There's a kids programming environment called Scratch, and I sat down with Scratch and kind of trying to get my kids into programming, and like in half an hour built that game on Scratch. Just the way that computers have evolved, right? It's just so much easier. But yeah, it was self-taught. As a lot of programmers are and continue to be. There is a lot of self-taught programmers. Yeah.
But you weren't an entrepreneur. You weren't an entrepreneur from the beginning. You got a job out of college, correct?
Yes, but the path to that. So one of the things one thing growing up, I never thought opportunities were something that were given to you. Really, I always thought that they were things that you went after. You created opportunities, right? So even that first job. So as I was looking at the market, I was graduating from college. I graduated from George Washington University, so I was there in DC, and next to us was the World Bank and the IMF, right? These large multilateral organizations, and there was no way for a bachelor to get into one of those organizations. Really, it's just PhD. So I applied anyway. I applied, sent it off, and I knew somebody in the World Bank, and she said, just come in. I'll let you in through the security, and then take a couple copies of your resume. And I did. And she said, you might want to talk to so-and-so. So I was inside the World Bank, this 22-year-old kid out of college with resumes. I put on a suit. I took that much, care. Went to people's offices. I mean, while they're working.
Really?
Just knocked on the door. And
you can see that happening today, right? The environment we're in now. Here comes Alex, he's 22, walking the halls, right?
Surprisingly, though, how nice people were. They were, and also I was savvy enough not to ask them for a job. I would ask them, do you know anybody looking for somebody who can, write and do some, econometrics, some, basically statistics. And, they would say, well, I don't know, but you could talk to so-and-so. So when I would go to the next person, I would just say, hey, Jim told me to come over here. So I was just kind of, going from one to the next, saying that the other guy sent me. And I, eventually I landed on somebody who said, you know what, I'm actually looking for a research assistant. And then interesting thing was, about 2 months after I was employed by the World Bank in this way, I got a letter back from the formal route saying that, I had been rejected from my application had been rejected. But at that point I was in, and then once you're in, you're in. So again, it really, the World Bank is, as they say, a great place to be from. So that was definitely kind of kickstart. I ended up staying there about 3 years, and then head off on, kind of an entrepreneurial direction.
So then, Alex, you had mentioned that when you were at the World Bank is when you wound up back in Brazil, right?
That's right.
Okay, so you went to Brazil on some international assignment with the World Bank, and why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so around 94, I was employed by the World Bank in the northeast of Brazil, and it was for it's for a technology project. They had a loan there with the educational department, and I was helping in the implementation. And then, but that was only a 6-month stint. They actually wanted me to do additional work from the capital of Brazil, Brasilia. But at that point, something interesting was occurring. It was we were watching what was going on with the internet in the U.S. Right, all of the whole .com bubble was beginning to inflate, And so it was pretty exciting. And I remember it was like 95 when the Brazilian internet, the backbone, really came online. And I saw an entrepreneurial opportunity. I said, hey, I can get in early on this and build a technology company, in the early days in Brazil, which is what I did, and it became one of Brazil's leading email technology companies, and I'm still, I'm on the board of that company today. But that was, it was the bank that took me to the northeast of Brazil. But I stayed on. Eventually, what happened to be 20 years, right? I had originally gone down to Brazil thinking I'd be there for 6 months.
Wow.
20 years later, 2 kids and a wife. So careful when you go to Brazil. Came back and started my second venture here in the U.S.
Wow.
When did you get the entrepreneurial bug?
I think it comes with. It was even going to Brazil was entrepreneurial kind of jump, and really kind of setting off on my own and wanting to, kind of see the rest of the world and see what could be done, right? So that was back in my time in Brazil, basically. I think I had gained some confidence and believe that the world is what you make of it, and that one of the things that helps, right? And I think for a lot of people don't actually recognize this, but one thing is I was younger, but I always felt that I had a safety net in the worst case. In the worst case, I could crash back at home, reset and go again. A lot of people don't have that in the world, right? And I saw that certainly, in Brazil, seeing real poverty. People do not have that kind of safety net. And so I think that's a huge enabler, right? Especially having the ability to have a fallback in a worst case situation. So that certainly helped me, in my entrepreneurial, adventures, right? Really knowing that it's not everything at stake.
I guess you weren't married or had kids or anything when you started the
entrepreneurial. No, not at that point.
So you were 25 when you 25, 26 when you made this transition, right? And I always find it fascinating when you talk to people who've kind of started new companies and so forth. And there's so many things you have to take into consideration to do that. So did you need a lot of capital to start the business in Brazil, or it was something that you could kind of run on a shoestring, so to speak, and kind of hope you're going to drive growth and then use that growth to kind of fuel additional investment and so forth? What was it like?
Yeah, it was in hindsight, which is 2020. Brazil is a terrible place to try to start up a startup, especially back then. The cost of capital is way too high. Interest rates are super high. So that we had to start it with some capital. We were able to. I had a partner. He was able to, with a lien on some land that he had, we could get a loan from a bank. But it was super difficult. I mean, very different from the capital fluidity and the access to capital that you'd have in the U.S. But we were able to do that, and actually, we did tap into U.S. Capital markets. We got our first fundraising from the only VC that we could find in the U.S. that would invest in Latin America. It was an organization called Darby Overseas Investment, now part of Franklin Templeton. But they did invest $1 million at the time. And that really, launched the company and allowed us to really, move the dial on our growth.
And how early was that, Alex? So you start the company. Did you immediately have to go out and look for capital, or was this something that year?
No,
2
we
years
started.
in?
Yeah, we started with very little, right? I mean, one of the advantages of just being super young, at least from my perspective right now. You can go on nothing, and so it was really, very thin living. You have nobody depending on you, right?
Right.
So we actually, and I remember when we hit our first deal, it was with the local newspaper, more expressive deal, and it convinced us this can work, right? So then we just said, hey, that's it. And and there were actually some other partners, but it ended up just being myself and another. One of the things I think that people you make a mistake about, when you do the entrepreneurial plunge, you've got to go full in. Some of the other people, they wanted to do, okay, I can do this part-time, I'll keep my day job and do it, unless you're like completely in, that's when
Right.
you really got to really commit yourself. So at that point, with that first deal that convinced us, we just said, hey, we're going to do this. And then that's when we went after capital.
We have another question.
Sorry to backtrack, but you spoke about your safety net. What exactly do you mean when you said a safety net that you can go back? What were you going back to?
Well, assuming my parents would let me back in the house.
Your parents' basement,
that
basically.
Was the safety net. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was it. Just, my room, a sofa or something, right? Yeah, just heading back to Bethesda.
Well, after eating a lot of Pop-Tarts, probably as a startup,
Oh, right.
going back to your parents probably seemed to be a good alternative. If
No,
things
it
didn't work
would
out,
definitely
right?
be an upgrade. Yeah, for sure.
Were you fearful?
What's that?
Were you fearful?
Not. It was a lot of work, and I think, thinking back, in some cases, yeah, there was a lot of apprehension. There was a lot of people's money, especially when they invest. Was on the line. I was young. I was, somebody had invested $1 million in an idea of ours, and so that creates. I mean, I was doing 80 to 120-hour weeks. So when you have nothing else, right? That's there was definitely fear, and then often you come home and you're like, what am I doing? Why did I do this? Because my buddies back in the U.S. were often getting their jobs in Manhattan or in Silicon Valley or working for big companies, and I had gone off on this this tangent in another country, and yeah, there are definitely many moments that you question your sanity.
How do you keep going when you're questioning your sanity?
Just one step in front of the other. You just keep going. I think there's a common trait probably with a lot of entrepreneurs. There's always, and I always say it sometimes, unfortunately, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. It might be just, you hope it's not a train, right? But you always feel like there is a way out of here, right? And if we do this and we do that, it never quite goes out. And if you're willing to not give up, right? Come hell or high water, that eventually. As they say, investors, right? They don't invest in the technology and the idea. They really invest in the team. And that's very true, because if you're investing in let's go back to Europe, when they would invest in a ship that would go to the New World to, find gold or whatever, the weather will change for sure. And,
right.
But what's going to happen is that crew has to be able to sail that ship. So it really is an investment in the team.
Was it successful?
So that's going to be. What's that?
Was it successful?
Yes, the first venture was successful. Yeah,
Oh, that's awesome.
It had, yeah.
I guess one question, Alex. When you're building the business, and for any of us who have been involved in trying to scale businesses, that's hard. In some ways, kind of starting the business it's not that it's simple, but there's steps you have to take and things you need to do to kind of get the business off the ground, and those things you can do, and you may gain some success, but I find, at least in my own experience, that scaling the business is always challenging. And I'm sure there were times when you were at a point with this business where you had reached a certain run rate, and then you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we scale? And did you ever run into, scenarios where you just thought the business wasn't going to grow, and you kind of questioned, geez, do I need to exit this business? Does it have a future? Things of that nature, or was it really kind of a straight hockey stick like run? After you had built the business.
Yeah, definitely not a straight. That mxHero is a different story, but that company was definitely not a straight hockey stick. Was ups and downs, and But if you draw that graph, those up and downs end up tracing a kind of a slightly a slope. And as anything, the more time you're in business, the more the market knows about you. So there's all of that. The more traction you just get just for being there, time helps to build your business. You learn, you make mistakes all the time. I mean, we lost some huge contracts just for major just making our mistakes. I do question that if I had taken that same effort and had applied it here in the U.S., what that would have looked like. Right? Mm-hmm. Again, Brazil is a very tough environment to build a company. I often think that the entrepreneurs from Brazil, it's like our Vietnam vets. If you can get through that, the rest of the world's easy, right? Because it is just everything's against you.
So you were there for 20 years. You came back here. Was the next evolutionary step mxHero?
Yes, and actually that was a brainchild. That the genesis was before we left. We were thinking, there's a bigger. First of all, the company wouldn't scale, not within the context of Brazil, outside of Brazil's borders. Right? You can build a good business, but it's it's going to be a Brazilian company. So we looked to what we were playing with, a technology that was ubiquitous, email, and that had unsolved problems and continued to be unsolved. And we were sitting on solutions, and we knew that there was a path forward. So we were thinking that let's do this again, but let's project it from the U.S. So actually, we got started through Entrepreneur Roundtable Accelerator (ERA) in New York, and so we head up to New York, and we went through the accelerator program, which was extremely useful. They were, it was great guidance, a great program to this day. We got our funding, and then we, moved out here. Although leveraging our heritage, our Latin America heritage, we kept our development resources down south, which was a huge advantage, right? Doing it, it's not outsourcing because they are core to the team. So it works very well. We don't have any of those issues. I speak the language. So we were able to, we have excellent developers for a fraction of the cost of what we would have to have, up here. And that was a good kind of a competitive advantage for us.
We have another question.
Yes, we have an anonymous ask. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh yeah, that's an easy one actually. It would be sales and marketing. And the reason I say that is because I'm definitely a product type CEO, and my solution, the way I look at the world is, hey, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door, and that is not the case, not nowadays. And certainly it's been the case with mxHero, where we have been, we've hit our hockey stick now, but it took a lot of work to really, and we're still working on it, getting the message out. Right. You can build a better mousetrap, but if people don't know about it, that's not going to be very relevant. So sales and marketing is more important, and I appreciate that now. After a lot of hard knocks, than I had used to think when I was more naive.
So Alex, why don't we talk a little bit about mxHero?
Yeah,
right. So we've kind of danced around mxHero as a company, and obviously it has some relationship to email. But maybe you can take us through just for a few minutes. What does the company do? What is the technology that kind of makes up its product offering, and what is the problem you're trying to solve in the marketplace?
Sure. So, what we had just talked about is really the backdrop to kind of the, that culminated in mxHero. Essentially working with email, it is ubiquitous technology. However, it has been prone to a lot of issues, right? It causes a lot of issues, right? Everybody knows about the overflowing inbox, the file size impediments, the productivity drain that it is, the security issue. I mean, you can barely go by a day without some kind of major breach. I mean, literally the failings of email have caused politics to shift, as we know. So it's just it's such a central piece of so much of what goes on in our society, because it is the primary means of communication. But we have to remember it is a technology that was developed back in the 1970s, right? So we were thinking, how do you improve this core technology, probably the most used technology, that used globally? It makes Facebook look small.
It's the ultimate killer app, right?
It is. I mean, even to have Facebook, it's your identity on the internet, right? You need to have your email account. So, so the challenge was you can go two ways with that, right? You can reinvent email, or you can try to make it better. And certainly some have gone off on the reinvent email, like the Slack and those type of efforts. But those don't address the intercommunication. Unless everybody's on Slack, that's not going to allow you to intercommunicate between organizations.
Right.
So we went off on we can make it better, right? And we thought that you'd have to make it better. It's such a habitual tool that asking people to use a different email client or do something differently, asking the end user to change is a bad bet as well. So we approached it from the server side, from the back side, right? In other words, saying that the technology, we're going to influence email, make it better, right? Solve problems of email, but do it from kind of behind the scenes, so that when you're working with it, we'll automatically add functionality in flight, right? Mm-hmm. And that was really the genesis of mxHero. Was really the idea of, and our thought was, instead of trying to build those ourselves, all of those improvements, we were going to build a platform that would connect best-of-breed technologies to email. So you could go out there and look for, okay, I want to use this technology and integrate it with my email and do it in such a way that really the end user wasn't required to do anything. This could be deployed centrally for the entire company. So that's what we were aiming for. That's what we developed. And in that integration of best-of-breed technologies,
what does it do?
We had, what's that?
What does it do?
Getting there.
Oh.
So we connected. So part of that, I mean, the platform, at a broadest sense, connects other technologies. What we ended up focusing on was connection with this new technology at the time. It was like 2012. Was cloud storage technology, and you'll mm-hmm. know it as, a lot of people know it as Dropbox, for example. Or Box, right? So we really focused on the enterprise cloud storage, OneDrive, Google Drive, a company called Ignite as well. So what we'll do is we'll integrate these technologies with your email. Now, how does that manifest? What does that mean, right? It has various forms, but at its most simple to understand, and actually one of its most powerful permutations is the ability for me to send you an attachment, right? So I'm going to attach an attachment, and I'm going to send you this attachment. And in flight, automatically, you'll receive it as a file link. It has in flight automatically gone to my Box account, let's say. And then in a folder, like if I send it to Cliff, it'll go into a folder of Cliff in my Box account. And then, then there'll be another folder for the particular subject that we're conversing on. And in that folder will be your file. So what you'll see is just the link. And that solves a whole slew of problems of email. And actually goes back to some original proposals of email for improving email. It allows me to send file sizes of almost any size. It allows the company to control that flow of email. One of the interesting things about the architecture of email, and specifically email attachments, right, which people send back and forth all the time, is that email, again, designed in yesteryear, right, at a time when color TV was beginning to take over black and white. So one of the fascinating things is the most common file sharing technology today in the world is a technology that was developed, back in the early 70s. And that is costing us now, right? It's costing us in infrastructure and in security. Companies have to lay out, defend themselves continuously, really from the threat that email causes, and also particularly the loss of data. And why the loss of data around email? A lot of people don't realize this, but when you send that email with that attachment, it'll duplicate 4 or 5 times, up to 8 times, just to send it to one person. All the infrastructure, everywhere that it goes, everywhere that it gets copied, it's going to create a full copy, which you have no idea about. If there's a breach, to the company that you sent it to, your data is up for grabs, just as much as their data. Right?
Alex, is this something you are passionate about?
Yes.
Tell us about the passion.
Because, what's that?
Tell us about the passion.
Sure. Well, it is one of those dent in the universe things, right? First of all, we're talking about a massive technology, about 5 billion users, right? And it's something that is, if we can solve this, this really impacts the world in a positive way, because we're going to be solving issues around all of the millions of dollars that companies are spending in trying to contain their data in the data breaches. Imagine if all your email that you send, all of those attachments are automatically not in the emails. They're actually still under your own control. It means that when there is a data breach for a company, for example, that information is not up for grabs, right? Imagine what would have happened if WikiLeaks, which was 30 years of State Department communications, breached. How history would have been changed if there were no file attachments, for example, in all that information, or the Sony breach, where one of those files was called passwords, right? So imagine if that wasn't there, right? So even what a lot of people don't realize is that even ecologically, it turns out that, and we recently published really information that's accessible on the available statistics, that just our habitual use of email attachments in the corporate space is the equivalent of driving a car 1,000 miles, the CO2 equivalent, right? So just because of all the data center, everything that's required of those attachments. And just to put it in perspective, every user using email ends up generating 55,000 copies of their email per year. Just how much unnecessary duplication has been created.
Yeah. So Alex, I think for me anyway, just having kind of sought you guys out from a technology perspective and looking to partner, one of the things that was really impressive for me about the technology that you guys have is that it doesn't require the user to do anything different than what they normally do in terms of using email. So there's no learning curve for the end user whatsoever. And as a result of that, obviously, the adoption levels and adoption rates inside any organization are almost overnight. And of course, as you've mentioned, I mean, there's so many challenges associated with email security. Obviously, it's the most significant hole in securing the infrastructure inside any company. And the majority of the security challenges are tied directly to the file attachments that are coming in that somebody inadvertently clicks on and spawns a virus or ransomware or whatever the case might be, right? And of course, your solution, without any end user intervention, basically strips that attachment and isolates it, if you will, inoculates it in some way by putting it in cloud storage, so it can't be opened and it can't then infect the internal network within the organization. So I know for me, when I looked at all these factors, and then you start to think about from a market perspective, just the ubiquitous use of email, that to me was the home run in terms of mxHero's technology. Right. It was that really simple user scenario, and in my view, it's one of those few technologies that I've had the experience of kind of bumping into, if you will, that is a true no-brainer. If you're an IT professional and you want to lessen your headaches associated with securing your network infrastructure, obviously email is the biggest place you've got to deal with in terms of inoculating yourself. And this does it overnight. So for me, I mean, if you're an IT professional, this is an absolute no-brainer, and a no-brainer that doesn't cause any angst amongst the end users in your organization, which is typically what you find a lot of technologies, deal with today, right? I mean, you may solve a problem with that technology, but then you're asking the end user to jump through 3,000 hoops in order to figure out how to use it. And this doesn't do any of that. Yeah. I I think that in and of itself is really the great value of what you guys have created at mxHero.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the number one design decision and the enabler, right? We can do lots of technology. The hard thing is the human, right? It's easy to hack a computer, but to hack a human is a lot harder. So I'm Dennis, to your point, I was talking to the CIO, actually it was the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer of a U.S. defense contractor. And he said, Alex, if the user has to do one thing, not even 1,000 hoops, one hoop, forget it, all bets are off for security. It has to be automatic, right?
So we're almost out of time. So I'm sorry, we just have, we're there. We're almost the hour mark. I want to get back to the entrepreneurial aspect of this.
Yep.
Give some advice to somebody who's young like you were, who wants to, they want to get a startup going. What kind of advice would you give them based upon the experience, the bumpy roads, and the failures and successes that you've had?
Yeah. I would say you got to get moving for sure, right? As far act, right? I think, again, my entrepreneurial start was in a different context, was a lot more difficult. I think there has been never a better time in history, never. The access to capital, you can do it, even the crowdsourcing, right, aspect, which is relatively new. You can get the capital, right? Just be ready to work hard. And your team and those relationships, 60% of companies fail because of what's called founder drama. So definitely it has to be people with whom you work well. But I would say, and you're going to fail, it's just part of it, right? So you got to just get out there and learn the lessons, right? So my advice would certainly be, first of all, you're no better time than now. Really, technology is accelerating like crazy. So the opportunities, the ruptures in the market are there's so many there's more opportunities out there than we can possibly address. And this is just going to be, more and more so. In fact, I just heard a statistic the other day that in the next 10 years, 40% of the Fortune 500 are not going to be here anymore.
Right.
They're going to be replaced by startups.
It's amazing.
So this is the time. I would say, if I was 20 years old again, I would be just back in it again. And you can start up on many different ways. I would just, maybe because where I come from, with regards to, just the profession, I would say definitely technology is a huge part of that story. So, some piece of technology, but mind you, this is from a guy who, did English literature and econ in college, right? And never did a class of programming in my life. Right, so a lot of this is accessible, and another statistic: 60% of programmers are non-programmers by profession. Right, they're like researchers or whatever. It's a tool, right? So I would say, go for it, and if it doesn't work, hey, pivot, do something else, and you're going to learn through all those processes. And eventually, if you put in the time and the effort, and the passion, most important, it's pretty much guaranteed.
Yeah. So Alex, when you look back, at this whole span, I mean, in both companies now you've been a part of, what's been the most rewarding part of kind of this entrepreneurial journey that you've been on?
It's again, it just might be my experience, but it is great to work for yourself, right? Now, mind you, you never really quite work for yourself, because even when you're working for yourself, you work for the market, right?
Yep. Sure.
But making those decisions, guiding yourself, it goes back to that saying where if you're not working for your dream, you're working for somebody else's, right? So go after your dreams and try to build them, right?
That's great advice.
I would say, yeah.
Great advice. Well, we thank you for being on the show.
I got one other question now.
Thank you for having
me. For Alex, before we wrap it up, if we can.
I know what's coming.
Yeah, he knows what's coming. But so when I met Alex like 5 years ago, of course, he was wearing, I think, the same hat that he's wearing now.
I made a point of wearing the same hat, actually.
It's a new hat?
No, I made the point that wearing the same because I knew, it was going to come. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen Alex without that hat. I just wondered if, like, does that
You got
come
feeling.
like when you get like venture funding? They give you one of those hats that you can wear, and so you can kind of create this CEO persona, or what's the story with the hat?
Okay, so I got it as a gift from my wife years ago. I was like, I'm not gonna wear a hat, and then we moved to San Francisco, and it's like, it's always cold here, right? I mean, even in the summer. And I was like, I'm gonna wear a hat, and I was surprised by the utility. It actually keeps you warm, right? That whole thing is 70% of your body heat goes out through your head. It actually keeps you warm. It keeps the dust off, keeps the light. There's so much utility from a hat, and I kind of think we lost that. If you look at the old films, everybody's wearing hats, right? That was something that we always used to do. So I just started wearing it, and it actually, and then as an entrepreneur pitching, it also has a differential, right? You have the investors are looking at their ninth batch of companies.
Oh, do you remember
the
that
one
guy
with
with the hat?
Oh, look, I remember that guy. Right. So there's
So
a
that
little
makes
bit
sense.
of that. as well.
So another piece of advice for entrepreneurs: when you're going for venture funding, make sure
Wear a
you wear
hat.
a hat.
Yeah.
Something
Well,
different. Right.
Well, thanks very much
Good.
for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
All right. I appreciate it too. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Alex.
Dennis,
Good
good to
seeing
see
you.
you. Yep,
Next
take care.
week, we will be back, and our guest will be a Dennis Amorosano,
I'll be here again.
and we will talk with you about your journey.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm looking
Thanks for
forward to
being
it.
here, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same channel, 5:30 p.m. on the Streamcast Network Facebook page, YouTube, and www.streamcastnetwork.com. See you next week. Oh, Frank, you didn't get the credits? Okay. Talking about.
Yes, I know. That's why I tried to summarize it.
We really need to dumb it down. Like if you have technology people on,
Yeah.
it's fine, but we really need to dumb it down a lot and stay away as much as possible from the technology and talk more about
Yeah, what's the value?